I'm still not completely sure the purpose or the message behind Chroma because in a way it's very abstract. Very abstract. Visually, the game has a lot of vibrant colors and a lot of like fast and abstract and very creative animations. Um, at some points, the in some chapters rather, the visuals do tell you like something about the narrative or the story, especially in the chapter. I believe it's chapter one or two, where the whole scene is a bunch of pictures of people, and that really challenges you to think more about what's going on. Like, yeah, you see pictures, but what's the point behind the pictures? And I think the visual design, each chapter has a unique visual design that makes you think in a different way about the game. Um, I did have a couple problems with the audio because it seemed like in some of the chapters, the audio, the music was too loud, and I couldn't really hear what the narrator was saying. So I could hear the music perfectly, but I could only hear like certain words of the narrator, and it made it hard to understand what was going on. Oh, I watched the video documentation. I didn't play the game. That's the way I viewed it. The interaction design, it seemed to be relatively simple, like simple and not simple at the same time. You just move your mouse around, and where your mouse is affects what happens on the screen. Um, the player, the user, seems to have free choice of what to do with their mouse as well. And then based on the chapter, uh, different things will show up. For chapter one, I still don't know completely what the chapter's about. However, after viewing the faces and the pictures, I felt that the chapter was trying to make me think about who was represented in the pictures, and it seemed like the chapter was trying to draw attention to my own thoughts to see if there was any preconceived ideas or stigmas about the people in the pictures. For instance, did I have my own ideas about the people in the pictures before it was revealed? And on a deeper level, it felt like in some regard it was doing this to show racial differences and stereotypes we might have from people. There's pictures of people from all different walks of life, so I think it was challenging us not to label them. Chapter 2, the three main themes seem to be memory, communication, and thoughts. This chapter was about waking up from sleep, quote unquote, and the narrator talks about, though abstractly, the ideas of memory, thoughts, and communication, like I said. Digital media and the internet specifically have brought a lot of very unique processes of communication where the users can be active or passive depending on what they want. As well, on the internet, users are anonymous, unlike different modes of communication. Furthermore, digital media is a mode of personal expression through language and art that can reach people faster. Ultimately, I still don't know the main themes of the game, or the game can be seen through many different lenses, I feel. However, digital media and communication seem to be the main focus of this chapter. There was a lot of talk about the quote unquote marrow, which was the first introduced in the prologue. And the narrators talk about how humans used to enter a sort of cyberspace simply by thought, but that we have now lost the ability to do so. And my first instinctual reaction to this was I thought of the Matrix for some reason, even though they're quite different. Chapter 3, um, awakened them was like prevalent in the chapter. At the beginning, the narrator talked about conflict and how no one seemed to really care at the time. No one had the consciousness to realize what was going on. Then he explained that after the conflict, rather, people will say that the answer was obvious to the question. Also, there's a theme of self exploration and that people have become very comfortable with not only themselves but the world around them. They've been dumbed down and they have like this sort of self obsession and self absorption. Um, Through this chapter, we are repeatedly greeted by the words like awaken, sleep, and it seems like the message is that people need to get out of the cyber, quote unquote, cyber trance that they are in and to come to life in a way, to participate in the world around them. The marrow seems to be some sort of altered conscious state that one enters that unravels the true self. I believe that's the exact words they put was unravels the self. At first, like I said, this reminded me of the Matrix, where the altered consciousness state makes you blind to some things, and even the narrator in chapter 4 says that marrow changes you, but ultimately you have to accommodate to what the marrow tells you. And thinking about it now, this seems like kind of like society, the societal norms about people, about race, etc. I think that's what this marrow thing might be hinting at. And there's also the idea of the Nemenos in the game. The Nemenos is indicative of our way of thinking as a society. It is said that in the Nemenos, there are no ears, eyes, or any of this, or any senses, and it's a way of communication through thoughts, feelings, sensation, and emotion. And there's an interesting question posed in chapter 5 where the narrator asks, what do you think of when he says the color green, and whether or not your green and his green are the same shade. Interestingly enough, this makes me believe more that the Nemenos is a way to communicate with people without having any prejudice, stigma, or stereotypes about them. It's a person to person experience, and there's no labels, there's no race in the Nemenos. I don't think there's no gender, there's no sexuality. You're just speaking to people in a sense through your thoughts and your feelings more than like uh, like visuals. In the last chapter, we're um, introduced to like something completely different than the other chapters. This is a simulation of sorts where there's obvious humanoid type people and the issues of race, race, race and society like come about. The narrator um, shows us that like in the simulation, depending on what race you choose at the beginning, you can only choose one race. That your skills and your involvement in society change. Like if you choose African American, your dance and your singing and your musical capabilities go up, which is like a racial stereotype. And then like if you choose white, that like you're quote unquote better at business and you make more money, which is like this is like the societal views. This is like a current issue. Like we place too many social stigmas on people and we define them before we even know like who they are, what they're doing. Because of my invented body. Furthermore, what we see in this game is like what we see in the continuation of this chapter is themes of mislabeling, racism, sexism. The character says that she's like unjustifiably hated and like loved, and that people don't know how to address her because she's both African American and Caucasian. So that like people get confused, and there's like this deep sense of like misunderstanding of like who a person is. And I think ultimately this game gets at is like there's like some serious issues in society about race and culture and like sexism. So I think this game sort of like abstractly but also like very definitively describes what's going on in the world. I'm still not